I say to those American workers, Scott Bessent is in Geneva right now talking to his counterparties in China, right? Remember, this is just a China problem right now, right? We have 145% tariff. They have 125% tariff. Those tariffs are too high to do business. But that's why they're talking right now.
Joining us now is former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors during the Biden administration, Jared Bernstein, and Politico White House reporter Megan Messerly. Welcome to you both. So, Jared, what is your reaction to Commerce Secretary Lutnick there? I mean, it is valid for dock workers and truckers who are losing jobs right now to ask why these tariffs were so high to begin with, right?
Exactly right. What I was struck by and what we just heard was Secretary Lutnick sounding like this problem that we have came from outer space. And it wasn't, in fact, his administration and his boss, President Trump, who set these tariffs at a completely impossible level, 145%. Alex, you and I have talked about this for a long time, and especially in the Biden administration. I was always straightforward about accusing China of unfair trading practices. But you don't get to where you need to be by stopping, which is essentially what we've done, cargo ships from moving between here and there. And so we are almost certainly looking at empty shelves a few weeks hence. This administration never thinks of measuring once, twice, thrice, and then cutting. They just cut and then let the chips fall where they may. And that's just a terrible way to run a global economy.
And look, Lutnick, if you agree, sounded completely obtuse to concerns by dock workers, by truckers, Jared, who are saying, hey, we're seeing our hourly work diminish. We're worried about less income and being able to pay for what we need to for our families. There was no sense of that.
So, Alex, your problem with your analysis is you just have too much common sense that you're bringing to this. You know what I mean? It's anyone who knows anything about this, and even people who don't know much about it, will tell you if you set prohibitive tariffs, dock workers are shortly going to be in trouble. Now, if you want to explain to those dock workers why this is worth their while, why on the other side of this great things will happen, go ahead and try pain now, gain later. But in fact, there's zero empirical evidence that these kinds of initiatives will yield anything that's going to help those workers, or for that matter, the rest of us on the other side of this, which is, by the way, why you see the administration working pretty hard to find off-ramps to the president's just terrible trade policies. And they all kind of run around trying to explain how they're doing great negotiations. They're just covering up the damage that he's done.
So, Megan, this meeting, it was just to get the ball rolling. So expectations from the Trump administration weren't high going in. And yet Trump is touting a, quote, total reset of trade relations. And now we have confirmation of, quote, substantial progress. Was this second day of negotiations an unexpected development? Is it hinting things are going better than expected?
I mean, that is certainly what the administration is telegraphing out of these talks in Geneva. I think the one thing that we've heard is substantial progress. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, in the statement he put out, even referred to the words, a deal of some sort. Of course, we don't know exactly what that means. It's unlikely to be sort of a full-fledged trade deal, or even the kind of frameworks that we've seen be in talks in other countries, like the one we just saw come out of the United Kingdom last week. So I think there's still a lot of questions about what exactly the details of this are. Now, we've heard that there will be a briefing tomorrow, so we will get more of these details. And of course, some of the details may start to trickle out ahead of that. I think the big question is going to be, was this just a reestablishing of relationships, which was sort of the baseline goal going into the meeting, just an easing of tensions and opening the door for future negotiations? Or did we actually see some real movement here? The president, posted on Truth Social before this Geneva meeting, said, 80% tariff sounds good to me, but I'll leave it up to Secretary Bessent. But I think to the point that you all have been discussing, 80% is still prohibitively high. So that would honestly be more of sort of a cosmetic change, sort of signaling an easing of tensions more than anything with any practical effect. So lots of details to be figured out.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of, I'm going to pick up on that with you, Jared, and you said off-ramp, this 80% that Donald Trump threw out there. Experts are saying it's not going to make very much of a difference. So where is the Goldilocks zone, if you will? What rate could be enough to create the effect that Trump wants, but not leave store shelves empty?
There's no sweeping tariff that answers that question. That is, there's no tariff on the north of $400 billion of imports from China that is appropriate for every one of those imports. The problem that the administration faces is that they never did what you have to do in this space. Roll up your sleeves, go product by product, figure out where unfair trade is taking place, and tariff that product. That's what tariffs have historically been used for. And when you do it that way, it can work. But when you're talking about, Megan is 100% right. When you're talking about 145 or 80 or 70 or 60, none of those are off ramps. 34% is probably not an off ramp. So look, if you want to have a baseline tariff of something in the 10% neighborhood for some of the goods that are identified as being unfairly traded, or higher than that, we went a lot higher than that on things like electric vehicles and critical minerals, because those were areas where China was flooding our market unjustly. So if you want to roll up your sleeves and do the work, be my guest, case by case, product by product, the approach that they're taking won't work.
Okay, you're suggesting a surgical approach is what's needed. So, Megan,
Correct.
How much has President Trump been in touch with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent this weekend? Do we know if Trump gave input on negotiations, or is he more hands-off, and does he trust Bessent's judgment on this?
I think it's really been a combination of the two. I mean, we know that going into this meeting, the president essentially gave Secretary Bessent his proxy here. Again, in that True Social post saying, it's up to Scott B is how he referred to it in the post. That gives him a lot of leeway, Secretary Bessent, a lot of leeway to actually be able to negotiate something. On the other hand, we know that they have been in close communication. We know they talked last night. So this is not, happening without the president's involvement or input. This was something that was really important to China. In fact, they had been asking for a point person from the administration, to be able to have these kinds of conversations with. And they wanted to know that this is someone who had the president's support and the president's ear. So it's important.
And businesses will be watching that quite closely. Of course, the president is set hours from now to depart on the first major foreign trip of his second term to the Middle East. Clearly excited to head there with a win under his belt, potentially. Frederica.
All right. We're looking forward to more details. Joining me right now to talk more about these developments is Kenneth Rogoff. He is a professor of economics and the chair of international economics at Harvard University. He's also a former director of the International Monetary Fund and the author of the new book, Our Dollar, Your Problem. Professor, great to see you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we don't know the details on this possible trade deal with China, but set the stage for what's at stake for the U.S. economy with these trade talks ongoing with China. We did at least hear some optimism coming from our top U.S. representatives in Geneva.
Well, I think, as you say, we just don't know the details. Is this a reset? Is it a partial ceasefire? Normally, these kind of talks, there's so many issues, take months, years, so we'll see what comes out of it. But a tremendous amount is at stake for the U.S. and the global economy. First of all, our relationship with China is just incredibly important across so many dimensions. But also, there's so much uncertainty. Yeah. We had 145% tariffs, maybe there are 80% tariffs, but we sort of trade with China has been halted. So if there was a deal, and we actually believe both sides would keep to it, I think would also set the stage for making other deals and sort of ending this huge uncertainty we've had. But I wouldn't, go dancing about it just yet. Let's see what happened.
If there were a deal or something particularly promising, do you feel like that announcement would be made today ahead of the Asian markets opening, and perhaps it would start to at least make an impact there? Or does it tell you something that details will be revealed instead as promised tomorrow?
I think moving by tomorrow is already really fast. I mean, there are so many things to discuss. I don't know what comes in it. For example, respect for our intellectual property rights. They're cyber spying on us all the time. And frankly, closing up the trade deficit, which the president portrays as a national emergency, is going to also mean a lot less lending into the United States, which is going to put upward pressure on our interest rates, which are already high.
President Trump has suggested, he may lower the tariff rates, for China down to 80% from 145. I mean, you mentioned that, but earlier today, the president's Commerce Secretary said the administration plans to keep a baseline tariff for the rest of the countries the U.S. trades with. Take a listen to what was said.
So we do expect a 10% baseline tariff to be in place for the foreseeable future. But don't buy the silly arguments that the U.S. consumer pays. Businesses, their job is to try to sell to the American consumer. And domestically produced products are not going to have that tariff. So the foreigners
are going to
finally have to compete. They're going to have to compete. What happens is the businesses and the countries primarily eat the tariff.
Should we buy that?
No, I mean, that's just nonsense. The consumers are mainly going to pay the tariff. There are certain high-end goods with big markups where the businesses may take some of it, but the evidence is all that the American consumer is going to pay a lot. It's going to put upward pressure on inflation. But if they reach some certainty, that's going to be a big improvement. I'm skeptical that we're going to get there, anytime before the end of the summer, and I'm not sure we're going to get there then.
Wow. Okay. Professor Ken Rogoff, great to see you. Thank you so much for your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Trump's trade deals are falling apart, and China has him exposed. He says he has a deal, but guys, I don't even know if that's true. Probably not. But China's winning. And China wins either way, guys, at this point. Because again, I've said this before, the original narrative from the United States, or at least from the Trump regime, was our new tariffs on China, but really on everybody, have nothing to do with deals. We don't want any more deals. We want to bring all the manufacturing back to the United States. So if China comes begging for a deal, even if it's a sweetheart deal for us, we're going to say no. Because it's not about a better trade deal with China. It's about cutting China out entirely. And yet what's happened? First of all, China very correctly said, we're 5,000 years old. The United States is a baby compared to us. We existed before the United States. And at least in their mind, they say we'll exist after the United States. However much Donald Trump causes it to crumble, we'll be there even after the United States is gone if it disappears, is their argument. But also what they're saying is, okay, well, if you're coming to us for a deal now, you've already lost. Because your whole original point was, we want no more deals. And now you want China to pass new laws, new tariff deals, new tariff laws to help you? Because you want to be bailed out because your ships are empty, your ports are empty, your shelves are empty? Even if the deal ends up being a status quo, even if we end up right back at square one where we were under Joe Biden, that's a win for China. Because China was supposedly going to be cut off from the glorious United States economic empire, and now Trump is begging for a new deal, new laws, whatever. China's won. Trump's lost.